Well, good morning, everyone. It's Thursday morning, RVN TV, and this is this segment of Coffee with Joe. I'm your host, Joe Osmendi. But once again, that's not important. What's really important is the person I'm going to be talking to in a few minutes, Dr. Roy Swift with Workcred, and you're going to really enjoy this. So sit tight, relax, and Roy, nice to meet you and have you on Coffee with Joe today.
It's great to be here, and great that you're interested in the workforce issues, because of COVID and various issues of people losing their jobs, high unemployment.
Right.
The looking at building a new quality workforce and getting people's jobs is really quite important to this nation right now, I think.
Right. The timing couldn't be better. As we're going to talk about Workcred in detail, but Roy, you have such an impressive resume, I kid you not. And I would like you to just tell the viewers a little about your background first.
Sure. I started my life in a little small farm town in Matfield Green, Kansas. It's about 100 people. There were 36 in my high school.
Okay.
And I didn't know what I was going to do in this world. I knew I didn't want to be a farmer. Mm-hmm. I knew I wanted to do something else. That baling hay in the summer just said, no, can't be a farmer. Okay. So I got interested in the field of occupational therapy and then went to the University of Kansas and got my degree. And the Army was offering internships in the field of occupational therapy. Mm-hmm. So this little boy from the small town of Matfield Green, Kansas, went for his internship at Letterman Army Medical Center in San Francisco. Quite a change, wouldn't you say?
Sure.
And so I spent 28 years in the Army, ended up in the Army Surgeon General's office, where I became eventually chief of the Army Medical Specialist Corps, where I was in charge, policy-wise, of physical therapy, occupational therapy, dietetics, and physician assistants. During that period of time and being in healthcare, credentials and having quality credentials, in healthcare is really quite essential. And so I got interested, and through that interest and involvement in the occupational therapy professional societies, I became the executive director for the National Certification Board for Occupational Therapy that gives the national certification exam at the professional level and the technical level. And then the American National Standards Institute was looking for someone to implement the ISO standard that would accredit certification agencies, and I thought that would be an interesting thing to do. And so I went to the American National Standards Institute, created the accrediting of certification bodies, and because nobody really understood the difference between the word certification and certificate, we also created an accreditation program for assessment-based certificates, training that has an examination at the end to measure learning outcomes. And then through that accreditation experience and seeing all the issues about quality credentials, we decided to create Workcred, and the American National Standards Institute Board of Directors gave approval to create a new entity because it was going to have a consultant component to it. It was decided it did have to be a separate 501c3 organization because of conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. And so that's how Workcred got created, is through that journey of looking at credentials and quality. And this Workcred has three major areas that they look at. One's consulting, helping people build credentials better. Research, trying to identify things that we can make the credentialing system better, and then educational events and collaboratives. Okay. So that's sort of the journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. As you know, when you and I had talked previously, my background is in ISO 9000, so I'm really familiar with accreditation, et cetera. But when you talk about credentials, what is a good quality credential? Can you address that for us?
Yes, well, many times there are standards that people do not realize that there are. The standard that we use to accredit certification bodies. It was created and approved by 165 countries and what has been nationally adopted by the United States through an organization called ASTM International, which is a standard developing organization. And we also then created the national standard for assistant assessment-based certificate programs. And so when we look at quality, there are some various things. The word certification is becoming problematic these days because if someone says they have a certification, it could be all the way, and I'm not exaggerating, all the way from paying some money that said, I have these experiences, to fully accredited, where the certification body will have developed a standardized examination that's based on a job analysis that validates the competencies that need to be measured. That there is a recertification program that recertifies people through the lifetime of their career, that they have kept up to date their competencies. And thirdly, if they become bad actors, violate an ethical code if there is one, or proven incompetency, a certification is the one credential besides a state license that it can be taken away from an individual. So that if somebody says they're currently certified, that means that at least they haven't done anything that the certification body deems inappropriate and hasn't taken it away. So, but that's also the reason why people is doing this thing in this regard.
Well, you know, speaking of credential and certification, people have to understand it's not like just putting a plaque or a diploma on the wall and that's it. It's far more in depth than that, correct?
Pardon?
I said a lot of people think, well, a certification is just putting like a diploma on the wall, and that's not true. There's a lot more in depth to that. Exactly,
and it's very specific. Generally, there will be a listing of the competencies that are acquired. So that is a good transparent signal to the employer that if they go to the test blueprint to look at what tasks this certification allows people to do, then that becomes much more transparent in this regard.
Okay. I want to talk about Workcred now. Tell us a little bit more about how Workcred was developed and what paths you're taking at this point.
Yes, Workcred is designed to look at the quality of credentials and try to improve the credentialing system in this country. The credentialing system is very fragmented in this country. Employers, higher education, association certificates, certifications, which sometimes are separate from the professional societies, is pretty fragmented. Everybody kind of does their own thing, and there is a need to be a more integrated system. So not only are we trying to look at improving individual credentials and making them more transparent so that people understand when they're getting a credential, what they're getting in this regard. We also want to do a lot of research. We have been doing some research projects about how to improve credentials by putting things together. One research project dealt with embedding certification into bachelor's degrees. A lot of times people say, well, the bachelor's degree, it's nice you have it, but what can you do? And we think integrating certifications into academic degrees and courses may be a way of being more transparent and letting the employers and other people who need to know what it is that people can do. A lot of times, there's very little data when somebody goes to choose a credential as to what that credential can do. And we're working with another organization called the National Student Clearinghouse that has higher education data to try to put certification data together along with IRS data to be able to articulate what are successful career pathways, sort of a credential pathways. You know, if you get this and you go to this and you go to this, the end result seems to be pretty good in that regard. So, so the research to find out how we get an improvement of what we know, trying to increase, and then also having educational events. One of the groups that Workcred has is a federal agency council, and a lot of times we've had a couple of educational events where we are helping the federal government learn how to look at quality credentials and what to look for and this kind of in their federal agencies. So that's an example of sort of the three buckets of consultation, research, and educational events that Workcred is involved in.
Well, that sounds really like a really interesting prospect, because, you know, you're looking at what Workcred and everything is as kind of an alternative to traditional education, correct?
Right. Alternative, but also collaborative. We don't want, it may be that tying a certification to a traditional academic program or a training program may be good. And then in some industries, it may be that having the certification is all you need. You know, so it is really looking at the right credential pathway in some respects. And the right credential pathway might be just getting a certification and a series of certifications, because a lot of the certification bodies have large groups of certifications, and they can be stacked together. So that's important to understand too. There's quite a gap between the technical and the professional, which is problematic. In my opinion, we need to be looking at credentials that can allow a stair-step kind of an approach to a career. Because if you have the technician at the associate degree level, and then the professional degree is at the doctoral level, that gap is too wide for people. We need to be thinking about what can be created that would be valuable to the industry in a more medium kind of an approach versus this giant step between the two.
Well, Roy, we're going to have to take a break right now, and we'll be right back. And I want to talk more about Workcred and then credentialing, and we'll stick around.
All right, thanks.
Good.
Boardwalks built for fun. Legendary rock and roll clubs.
This is how we do it. Hip hip hop.
Casinos by the ocean.
Hip hip hop.
Now that's New Jersey. 130 miles of beautiful beaches, solid rock, and everything in between.
Look in the window.
Now that's New Jersey. Plan your New Jersey trip at visitnj.org. Waves of fun. Nights of excitement. And a trail of memories. Now that's New Jersey.
This plus this equals this, plus this, and this. Don't drink and drive.
Listen, what will make your event simply beautiful? Is it your attire, your decorations, your entertainment? Well, join me, Alicia Simone, as I chat with some amazing vendors and clientele who will share their stories and images and their experiences. Right here on RVN TV, Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. and Wednesday at 4 p.m. It will be simply beautiful. See you then.
Well, welcome back to Coffee with Joe. Again, I'm your host, Joe Osmendi, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is the person I'm talking to, Dr. Roy Swift, Executive Director of Workcred and in Washington, D.C. Roy, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks.
Good. You know, we're talking about Workcred and credentialing, and I really want to make the emphasis on, you know, an alternative type of career path that can be very informative and lucrative for people. A lot of times in the past, people look at a 4-year degree. You get a degree in philosophy, you get a degree in theology. What do you do with that? You know, and then I think there's a whole different path that people can take to be more successful, and that's going to community colleges, getting credentials for something that they can actually make into a career. Do you want to address that, Roy?
Sure. And you know, it's interesting. The data shows that there is a huge amount of people who get a bachelor's degree and then go back to community college and get the technical component to support that sort of thing. So it's very interesting. The community colleges, you know, because of their primary mission is to really look at local needs. And that's an important concept, that the community college looks at what industry needs and tries to reflect that in their courses in the credit and non-credit area. And community colleges are probably ahead of the universities in trying to look at certifications associated with their technical educational programs. Because it's much more relevant, and the community colleges are much more industry focused. But I have to tell you that the University of Tomorrow, I think, will be much more industry focused than they are today. It's a matter of survival, and it's a matter of attracting students that says that when you go to this school, you can get a good job afterwards in this regard. There are still the holdouts in liberal education that says that's not the purpose of the university liberal arts degree. It's to get jobs, it's to help people think and critical, which are some of the things that we hear industry saying they need. They say that it's not only the technical knowledge, but the ability to critically think, to problem solve, to build teams, to communicate well with others in interpersonal relationships. That's the other 50% of the successful worker in this thing. And that's the one thing that I'm hoping that we can begin looking at just in the certification world, because the certification world most of the time does not address that other employability skill component. It's more, do you have the technical knowledge to do this specific job in this regard? But I think the community college are especially prepared, and they tend to be more nimble in how they flex and adapt curriculum in a faster way, particularly on the non-credit side of the house, which frankly, my personal bias is there should not be non-credit and credit. Learning is learning, whether it's credit or non-credit kind of thing. It's a false dichotomy between those two concepts, because many times the non-credit side of the house is producing workers that are very successful, and that should be given credit toward a degree and not considered non-credit in this regard. So I'm a real proponent that we get rid of this non-credit credit kind of orientation because both are valuable and both need to count.
Now, Roy, we're getting another administration coming in, obviously, in the White House. Do you see more of an emphasis on community colleges now with the background of the First Lady?
Oh, yes. Dr. Joe Biden will definitely be promoting community college education. She's been involved in it for a long period of time, and certainly it has great value, and particularly the organization that she is involved in, Northern Virginia Community College, which is one of the real Cadillac community colleges in this country, along with many others. But since I live in Virginia, I'm quite aware of Northern Virginia Community College and the great work that they do. And I believe that also in Virginia, Northern Virginia Community College has developed a great articulation agreements with the universities, so that most of the time the credits earned at the community colleges will transfer readily over to the university community. This is a major problem in the country today, this transferability. Most of the time, universities are skeptical of some of the level and rigor of courses at the community college. And a prime example in healthcare that I was most involved in is there's always questions about whether the human anatomy and physiology is adequate to be counted in the bachelor's degree programs in the healthcare professions in this regard, especially as the degrees have increased, like many now are at the master's degree level, and places like physical therapy now it's DPT. You enter physical therapy at the doctoral level in this regard. So we think that one of the answers to this is to bring higher education more to competency-based education, because then it's very transparent what the student has learned. These general course descriptions don't get to it. You think, what did they learn about systems? Okay, so what did they learn about systems in this regard? So moving it to these are the competencies that a student has upon completion of this course will help the transfer issue, I think, in this country.
That's really important, and I think the word has to get out to the American public how important a community college education can be to somebody.
Yes. There is, there's certain regions where people are saying, well, no, my kid has to go to a university. There is this sort of status thing. But the reality is we know that many times the associate degrees in certain technical fields, they get higher salaries than people with bachelor's degrees.
Right.
And so, and they have stature in their particular industry. So we do have to demystify the community college as being something lower than in this regard. That it is a beginning, it's different, but maybe equally important in this regard.
Well, there's so many advantages to starting off at a community college. Economically, for instance, that's a big advantage. You're going to get the same kind of education you would get from a four-year college, for instance, in the basic curriculum you're going to be learning in the first 2 years. And again, when you're talking about an alternative education, what is a BA worth if it's not transferable to a really good-paying job or a good career path?
Yeah, no, and we need more outcome data from the universities and the community colleges. The consumer has very little data upon which to base and select a certain program, because the outcome data is very skimpy about what it is. And so we need the higher education community to step up more and be more transparent about what the outcome data is for these programs. And if the outcome data is not as good as they would like, then what can be interjected to increase the outcome data? This is one of the projects I would like for us to be able to do. I haven't found a funder exactly to do it. But my thoughts is that we should help, and we're thinking about doing this in some of the traditional colleges, historical Black colleges, or Indian, Native American, because this is an area that we think we really need to pay more attention to because of the quality work of these organizations, but again, not recognized by employers and the general citizen of this country. But to take some of those programs where we have low outcomes and intervene with a certification or a certificate or whatever, and see if that improves the outcomes of that program, versus just saying, well, it has low outcome, well, get rid of it. No, it may be that it's a good program, it just needs to be infused with the meshing of credentials or something of this sort. So we need to explore that kind of thing.
Well, Roy, that is so informative and educating my audience and my viewers on the importance of a community college, credentialing, certification, versus basically a regular 4-year program for higher learning. We're at the point in my program right now where I want you to look into the camera and tell people how they can reach Workcred, how they can reach you for more information.
Well, certainly going to the workcred.org website, we have several studies that we have completed that we think are important for them to know. Also, because we do have a consultant role, we certainly are very open to consulting with people to work with them on how to improve the credentials or create credentials that they don't have that they think they would like to develop in this regard. And we feel that it is something that we can be helpful to, whether it be an employer, or whether it be a higher education institution, or whether it's a professional society or a foundation in this regard.
Dr. Roy Swift, thank you for joining me this morning. That's just such an important conversation we've had, and I think it's enlightening people a bit about what education's worth and what education can really lead to a successful career for people.
Yes, I believe that credentials, a lot of people said, well, we need to talk about skills versus credentials. The credentials are too big of a hunk, so to speak, that many times, like in manufacturing, they say, well, I need a little bit of this, and I need a little bit of this, and I need a little bit of this. It may be that the unbundling of some of the larger credentials may be an important thing for the future. I believe that credentials is a way of messaging to employers what people can do, not just what they know in this regard. And so we hope to be able to work with that, and we welcome working with anyone who would like to work with us in this very important area of creating a quality workforce for the future.
Dr. Roy Swift, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good luck with moving Workcred forward and informing our audience and everybody in America how important credentialing is. Thank you so much for joining us on Coffee with Joe.
Hey, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Good. And thank you for joining me with Coffee with Joe. We'll see you next Thursday, same time, same station. Bye now.